Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to Raising Excellence, the most important 90 minutes of your day. Hello, I'm Michael, the MC and Opportunity Ambassador for today's show. And today's show title is A Gold Mine of Conflict. With us today is my fabulous co host. We've got a full house today, and we've got a special guest. But let me start with Agnieszka, our psychosomatic illuminator. I wasn't sure what your.
I was pointing the special guest on the screen, but maybe, and then you realize that other people's screens may look different. So,
Yeah, on live, you're actually pointing to me. So.
Okay.
Oh, you introduce yourself then.
You just witnessed Willow, our trauma consultant.
Hi, everyone.
Again. Okay, there you go. Dennis, our freedom facilitator.
Greetings and blessed love, beautiful people.
And our very special guest, the Bob Podolsky, the great Bob Podolsky, who is today, his title is the Conflict Conductor. We're going to be talking about conflict today. How are you, Bob?
Greetings. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we actually did a show on Monday where we talked a little bit about the difference between division and unity, and essentially the idea of the Hegelian dialectic and how divide and conquer is employed in so many different ways, two trains of thought leading to a destination that's essentially the same, and that's kind of where a lot of people start kind of getting an introduction to conflict in a lot of ways. A lot of the conflict that we're experiencing today in society, on the media, and so forth, is kind of directed via this divide and conquer. But the beautiful thing about conflict is that there's a lot more to it than one might assume. If we run away from conflict, we don't really realize the opportunity that's out there. And in most cases, probably 99% of the cases, if not more, there is opportunity to learn something. There's an opportunity to understand that in most cases, it's miscommunication or misunderstanding that leads to conflict. That for the most part, people have so much more in common than they do have in difference, that because of this kind of trained perception of what conflict is, we're losing the opportunity to learn so much about ourselves and about each other. But with that said, let me just get a round robin from each of you here on what your sense of conflict is, what your kind of overall view of conflict is, and maybe some of that opportunity. So who wants to go first? Is that Bob? Bob, you want to go first?
Okay.
Okay.
I always think of conflict in terms of reducing the concept to what happens between two people. In any group, there may be groupings of people who are in conflict. There may be multiple conflicts within a group, but it really comes down to what happens between two people. And to me, the gold mine in that is that when the conflict is resolved, both parties learn something. And I think learning something is always a great value.
Absolutely. How about you, Willow? You got anything?
Well, I was actually looking at the etymology of this word, which is fascinating to me. It comes from two versions of Latin, or not two versions, two different Latin words. Con meaning together, and figure. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it means to strike. So it ultimately means struck together, fought, and a contest between two people.
Interesting. Agnieszka, do you have any comment?
Conflict is a weird beast because on one hand, it's good to have conflict. It's good to step into conflict, not to avoid conflict, not to shy away from conflict. It's probably better to be brave and stand up than to be afraid and practice avoidance and confusion. But at the same time, overabundance of conflict can cause just as much harm as underabundance of conflict. So I think where it comes to conflict, there's this golden ratio, a gold mine, maybe.
Interesting. How about you, Dennis? I know your video is off, but can you hear us?
Yes, I'm with you. I was just figuring out a little situation we had here on the.
Well, we can get back to you if you want.
Sure. Yeah, do that in a second.
Okay. All right. Well, in regard to kind of the situation that conflict kind of creates, there is. I think that it's a saying that you say quite a bit, Bob, that people's character is really kind of shown in kind of high stress situations, and certainly conflict is one of those. Let's talk a little bit about how that reflects on people's character when they are able to deal with conflict versus when they're unable to deal with conflict or they want to run from conflict.
Okay. It's been my impression, deeply embedded now, that our character is formed out of conflicts and traumas that occur in our first 5 years mainly. During that time, as children, we don't have the ability to sort things out the way we do as adults. And so our character is formed through the trauma and the conflict that goes into making the trauma. As adults, though, the opposite happens. Instead of conflict and trauma creating our character, it reveals our character. And it does that in many different ways. I don't know if that's an adequate answer to your question.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you, Bob. Mm-hmm. How about you, Dennis? Are you ready to engage at this point?
Yes, sure.
Okay. All right. Wonderful.
I thought that was that is a really interesting perspective to differentiate between forming and revealing one's character. And one of the first things that come to my mind often is where I seek to validate or to find, for me, like a real life validation of something that is being said is within the realms of Capoeira, which is what I love to do. So when I think about conflict and Capoeira, which is the Afro-Brazilian martial art and culture that I teach and live, conflict is an essential part of that. And it is like it is conflict and conflict resolution at the same time. Like those seeming contrary things, actually they live in it all the time, all the while, because there is conflict, and as it arises, there's also creative resolution of that conflict, and the ability to shift your perspective and to shift the view on the conflict that arises enables you to see in the same situation where there's a perceived problem, there's also a solution. So the solution of the problem is already contained within the problem itself. So it does appear to me that conflict really is an integral part of our life experience. And if we choose to take the right perspective, to surround ourselves, maybe with the right teachers, the right people, then those are just two of the ways how we can actually make sense by using the senses that we have and by figuring out a deeper meaning of that conflict, which can also be perceived as nonsensical and solely destructive. But I feel there is even if it's just a grain of opportunity for growth and for development within each conflict that arises in our lives.
You guys have to carry the conversation for a minute. We're having construction challenges.
So one of the biggest issues that I've come across with people with conflict, dealing with conflict, and myself, I've also struggled with it, is this negative connotation that it's always going to end up bad, violent, or even maybe it'll trigger abandonment in some people. That's all I had to say about that. thought it might spur a
But if
conversation.
it does, then what? If there's abandonment, then what happens?
Well, oftentimes it's triggered, and then the emotions will be triggered, which usually have to be dealt with, a self-soothing way, or there usually needs to be some sort of conflict resolution to reset the nervous system. But that includes a bunch of different meditation techniques and self-soothing techniques.
So do both parties have to be agreeing to the conflict resolution? I'm sorry. I just yeah.
I mean, I would say so, because if you don't have both parties willing to resolve the conflict, then it's still conflict.
I think one of the opportunities that we have here is to certainly step beyond what is kind of the standard understanding of conflict. Like, for example, between two people. I think when you have two different perspectives and they're opposing, and certainly when it comes to like listening ability and so forth, and people being traumatized and all the other things that come along with that, the blind spots to understanding, it's very difficult for people that are in conflict to actually hear what the other person is saying. But with somebody or with a proactive approach, that can be a lot more refined, to the point that in many cases it becomes a lot more obvious. So that's one of the reasons that we've got Bob on here. Bob kind of put together an outline of a conflict resolution kind of proposal, as far as like how people could go about kind of through a 5 or 6 step process. I don't know, how many steps did you put in there, Bob? Six steps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. 6 steps. So just a relatively simple 6-step process that leads people through kind of understanding what are the elements that need to be addressed in a particular conflict that might be helpful. But being that we're kind of taking a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, or being that we can take a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, there's also that opportunity where when we see two people in conflict, we can be the third person that gives that third perspective, that could also be one in which could take that proactive approach, or could understand a process that could allow a facilitation of conflict resolution. But with that said, does anybody want to speak to that?
I'd like to say one thing. When two people communicate, generally, there are 6 channels of communication taking place. For instance, Michael, if I'm talking with you, my conscious mind is communicating with yours. Similarly, my subconscious is communicating with your subconscious. And my conscious mind communicates with your subconscious. Your conscious mind communicates with my subconscious. And each of us has a channel of communication between our own conscious mind and our own subconscious mind. So the reality of what's happening is a little more complex than most people realize. I have sorted out all those things, and you understand that any one of those 6 channels can give rise to conflict. It's important to be able to recognize, where is the conflict? What's actually going on? And so that's a piece of what I bring to the table, is I have a way of teaching that.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one of those things that's kind of a hidden aspect of understanding the true nature of conflict. In many cases, like what I was saying earlier about misunderstanding and miscommunication, that what is happening in our subconscious mind versus our conscious mind could be the creator of the conflict. It has nothing to do with the other person. And in many cases, probably quite a few, probably the majority of cases, it's what we think is actually going, or what we think is going on versus what is actually going on, that potentially is the biggest problem with conflict.
I feel maybe one of the core questions is, um, how to differentiate or how to make the difference between maybe what we can call like a destructive conflict and a constructive conflict, because I feel that through conflict we have the possibility to, you know, to develop and to further develop ourselves on all, you know, on many levels. And then it's this questions, and I feel we're going there. I'm not sure if I'm hearing right, but like help me along if that's what I'm hearing, which is the question: is there conflict versus peace, or, you know, friction versus the flow, like a flow of things, or is it are we able to see within maybe let's say a greater perception of peace? If you step out of a small box and we step at it and we look at it from a larger view, if we say that things are in balance, that there is a flow, that there is peace, and that there's conflict within that that flow of things, that greater flow of things, that peace that is there, and can we maybe look at conflict as something that is contained within something bigger? And if we assume that, or if we have that perspective, then maybe it is easier to step out of the destructive kind of conflict where we only can see the conflict that is there, but where we cannot see how that is actually situated in a greater situation of flow that is there. And if we posture ourselves properly, then we actually can transform the perceived conflict, which, you know, might be destructive in the moment, into something that can actually help us and everyone around us to grow and to move forward in life.
I was thinking something along the same lines. I was thinking, is it conflict or is it contrast? Is it contrast that's like a signpost for us to see what we do not want in life, what we need to avoid? Or is it actual conflict but if we're engaged in this kind of head-to-head energy with somebody else in a negative way, like not a negative way, in an aggressive way, like conflict, that takes a lot of energy, right? Taking contrast as a signpost, going, oh, I don't want that. I'm going to move over here. I'm going to do this now. I'm not going to give any energy to the stuff that I don't want or I don't like. I'm going to redirect my gaze to something I like better. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is that running away from my problems or creating a life I want?
I think it's a tool that, I mean, could be used for both. It just depends on how you're using it at that moment, because there's plenty of times where you probably should avoid a situation that's going to drain you of more energy than you have, because it's going to lead to more conflict. If you don't have enough energy to accomplish a task, why would you start the task?
That kind of goes along the line where our dear friend from Truth Conduit is going. He has been commenting a few times. He's saying hello to his friends. He wrote Acapulco 3, Germany 1, Virginia 1. He also wrote, I avoid conflict. It is unhealthy to avoid it when sometimes it may be necessary. For example, if a mask freak tells you off in the store, some would use nonviolent communication with them and maybe plant a seed, whereas I would just ignore them and walk away.
I actually did that today because I was frustrated and I didn't want to deal with it. And some lady was like, ma'am, you need to put a mask on. And I was just like, yeah, no. And walked away. So I was like, I'm not dealing with this right now.
Sounding like a true Californian.
Well, you know, as a matter of fact, there's kind of a sales routine where in instructing people about sales, they say that you know, people that kind of dispute what your presentation is, or you know, maybe ask difficult questions to a salesperson who's making a presentation. A lot of people fear that circumstance, but the reality is that's actually one step closer to like getting them involved in understanding the value of what you're delivering. And by showing some kind of emotional attachment to whatever the circumstance is actually like one step in the right direction. I don't know, Bob, what do you think about that?
I think it has some validity for sure.
Brandon,
think-
Oh, go ahead.
sorry.
I think that my inclination is to attempt to talk about this subject matter in a way that is sufficiently general that it has the maximum applicability. Uh, for instance, Agnieszka, in a recent conversation that we had, you took me to task, it seemed, for focusing on problems rather than their solutions, whereas I really like to focus on solutions. And I got to thinking about that. It made me curious, which is a really resourceful way of responding with curiosity. And I thought, well, how can we talk about solutions without talking about the problems being solved? So for me, that thought took all of the conflict out of that conversation that we had.
There's like 1,000 ways to go from there, but you know, dwelling on problems is not really beneficial to solving them.
Yeah, but
We
not.
have to at least define them, I think.
Yeah. Because if we
You have
shy
to
away from
dwell-
looking at them, we cannot define them, right? So we have to know what we're looking at in order to move beyond it.
You have to dwell long enough to be able to understand your surroundings, which is often it's a really difficult part of my counseling and even my own healing process is the negative emotions. It's really hard to dwell in them sometimes. We're often very too quick to move on from that because we don't want to deal with it anymore.
We do have a question from listener Brandon Habermas is there. He's asking, is conflict required for rapid growth, personal or societal? Or are we just so accustomed to it that it seems that way? And Truth Condit is also congratulating Agnieszka and Sam to their beautiful looks. Guapas, he says.
Well, in my opinion, in regard to conflict and do we need to go through it, I think in a large part, I think that is kind of understanding the character of the individuals that you're dealing with. And certainly as you kind of approach potential problems or potential obstacles that might get in the way of collaboration, you've got the potential to have conflict. But that's where really this is what I'm suggesting in regard to like this as being a gold mine is probably the best time investment that you can have in regard to developing solid relationships, trusting relationships, loving relationships, having commitment and accountability. All those things relate to being able to deal with conflict in a healthy way that then makes all those other things possible.
I feel that the beneficial view that I have assumed or that has helped me a good deal over the years is to retain a disengaged part of myself, if I can say that. So if there's conflict and I am aware of that, which is the prerequisite still to see that there's conflict on some kind of level, then that I will focus on retaining a part of myself which is not in conflict. And I feel, or that is my experience, that there is a part of myself which is not in conflict, which cannot be shaken, which cannot be thrown off balance, which is at peace and in harmony at all time. And if I don't feel that, if I'm not centered there, it's not because it's not there, it's because I've lost focus and I'm not centering myself there. So by reminding myself of that part of myself, then it helps me to it's not to shy away or to run away from the conflict, but to just enter that conflict with a limited part of myself. So I'm not overwhelmed, and then I don't fall into the trap of thinking or believing that who I truly am is in conflict, because I feel that is an illusion. So if I can enter a conflict knowing that it's only a part of me, it's a part of my character, a part of myself, maybe even the least of myself, that is entering into conflict in order to overcome a hurdle, in order to also progress further, in order to learn something or teach something, then I'm not totally involved, so to say, and I can, retain like a, like a part of myself that I can retreat to, and where I can continuously look for, some clear water from the fountain, basically, of peace and of harmony that I can use to, if necessary, calm down myself or center myself again if things get too engaging, so to speak.
I like that, Dennis. I like that a lot. It points for me to the fact that most conflict between individuals stems from conflict within one or more of those individuals. That if we are not in conflict internally, we have much less conflict with people around us.
Yeah. Yeah, beautifully said. And then it is really just an illusion, right? So the conflict that we perceive, then it is an illusion. It is an illusion, but we don't have to ignore it, because we look through the illusion of the conflict. We can engage, we can act, and we can learn how to act constructively and positively. But at the same time, we can center ourselves, saying that it's like like an actor. So we're playing the role of the one who is in conflict, and we're trying to play it the best way possible. But still, we know that, okay, we're on a stage and we're acting. It's some drama being acting out. But whatever. In 1 hour from now or half an hour from now, there's a little break. And we can sit down and drink a little water and then re-engage if we feel to do so.
Yes. I would like to apologize for all the construction noises in my background and all the workers. We're having some stuff installed, and unfortunately they came at this time. So sorry, everybody. Conflict, yes. What about conflict as a signpost for what you want and what you don't want in your life? Or maybe contrast as a signpost. What do you guys think about that?
I think that's a super interesting way of looking at it, because it's like, oh wow, that's interesting. It's not, oh gosh, conflict again, oh my god. It's like, oh wow, there's conflict here. Oh, in what area of my life is that? Oh, where does it hit me? Is it like on a mental level, on an emotional level only? Is it, and what kind of area of my life, does it seem to be reoccurring in, and who is involved? And what does this person or these people, what do they do to me? What do they stand for me in my daily life? And to see the pointers, I think it makes it exciting. That's something that excites me. It's like, oh, what is this situation revealing? What is this situation pointing me at? Because it creates that kind of excitement of moving forward, of moving through it, of stepping forward, of it stimulates my engagement in life in a way.
See, at the risk of sounding, oh, Michael, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to say something that, related to what Dennis was saying earlier about what I would call harmony. When you're in harmony, when you're at peace with yourself and you're essentially centered and balanced, there really is no conflict. You're in the middle. You're in the perfect state.
What if
And,
somebody is in your porridge?
Well, kind of like in a bowling lane where you got the gutters on each side. The gutters on each side are conflict, and you don't want to be in the gutter. You want to be on the part in the middle, headed towards the bowling pins, right? And so, like, harmony is like right in the center where you're going to hit the number 1 pin and hit a strike. And that's really, I think, the I guess would be the analogy of kind of the full potential of learning what is important. And so, to some degree, because we've been trained and conditioned to be, emotionally reactive to particular things that come about when it comes to kind of stereotypical behavior, it's that emotional cue that I think is one of the things that we need to really pay attention to about ourselves, as to what is actually what is creating that emotional response, that is that or the emotional reaction to the stimulus, that is so important, because I think when people start to look into that, that's when I think there's a lot of discoveries that can be made, which can take people out of the gutter and into that golden area in the middle.
So it's like, so life is like a bowling lane. When you're a ball, right? And there are two, no, I'm just reiterating. I want to visualize this. There are two gutters. So the ball can either go in this gutter or in this gutter, or it could go straight. And it's your emotions that kind of determine whether you're in the gutter or out of the gutter. It's not exactly what happens to you, it's more how you react to it. So different things flash, and you can either go, oh shit, I hate this, and fall into the gutter, or you can go, moving on, right?
For me, the most important reaction when I experience conflict in response to another person is curiosity. I've trained myself always to react to conflict with curiosity. What's really going on here? That takes me out of the automatic reaction.
But if the other person like does not play that game, doesn't want to respond, doesn't want to answer, avoids the question and stuff, then it becomes like masochistic almost. Like you're trying to figure out what the conflict is, and the conflict is not figurable because there's no collaboration. So you have to walk away from the conflict, walk your own path, get over it, right?
But there's
Well, go ahead.
go ahead.
Go
There's
ahead, Dennis.
thanks. There's freedom in the fact that you're able to recognize a wide array of possibilities in the moment, right? Like if you're caught into just like a stimulus reaction, basically, or he said this and you have to answer that, and that's the only thing you know, then you're kind of caught in that situation, in that reaction. But if you can recognize 2, 3, 4, or maybe like a couple of dozen different ways that you can respond, then there's already freedom in that. And if you take it from a larger view, again, then whichever response you choose to utilize in that specific situation, there's still there's flow and there's harmony, there's peace even in that. So is it possible that in conflict or in perceived conflict, there is also there is balance even in that? And I feel that this is something that reveals itself, but we have the possibility to determine the nature of the interaction. I'm not calling it conflict, but it's like if I'm stepping into the harder the circle, the ring with somebody, then we both have the freedom to choose the way we move, the way we interact with each other. So I might throw a kick, but I might do it very slowly or very controlled, but I might throw the same kick and really try to hurt somebody with that. So it is my choice, like how I interact, and then it's also his choice, the other player's choice, how to respond and how to take it. Is he gonna get hurt and step out, or is he gonna get angry, or is he gonna just let it happen? So if we are aware that we have a wide array of possibilities of responding and of engaging with each other, then, and also that whichever one we choose, there is still a how would you say, like a balance and a harmony even within that, then I feel that I find freedom in that. So it's like it takes off the pressure of me. It's like, oh, because we're all, if I scream back at him, or if I throw a kick back at him, that's not the politically correct thing to do, or that's not the nice way to do. Oh, grandma said I mustn't do that, and that's already creating more conflict. And then that's what's getting me caught in the situation. That's what's really like binding me and catching me in that situation. But if I say, okay, like I can throw back I can say something mean back to him. Okay, that's an opportunity. If I do that, that will be all right. Whatever happens after that, but that's all right also. If I feel that that's the thing to do, okay, let me do that. I accept that. So I'm at peace with myself for that reaction. But I can also, ask him a question. It's like, oh, why did you say that? Or what made you think like that? And be curious. Or I can step back and just let it happen and and disengage from the situation and just accept that it is what it is and move on from there. So there's many different ways of how we can react in a situation of perceived conflict.
What do you think, Bob?
I think that those statements are absolutely correct. And I think that being curious facilitates the awareness of how many opportunities and options we actually have. For me, it works that way anyway.
Yeah, yeah, it widens it, right? It widens our perspective. It's something that
Exactly.
opens up, and that really is the is development, right? That's stepping forward. That's like, oh, I haven't. Maybe there is something I'm not seeing, so let me be open for that. And it's only when you open up yourself, then more things, new perspectives, a new view on life, on the situation can actually come in. Otherwise, that's the I'm sure Mike has a quote from Bruce Lee about that with a with a glass of water. So we empty ourselves basically in order to make it possible that new water is being poured in our glass, in our cup.
Well, I would refer to the same quote that I had before from Bruce Lee, so I'm not going to mention that. But I did want to mention that a lot of the conflict that most people experience is conditioned conflict. It's things that are out there that are identifiable or stereotypical of particular people. Right now, there's obviously some obvious conflicts going on between people that wear things and people that don't wear things, and people that want a particular thing injected into them, and some people that don't. And so when those things are presented, there's an emotional response that takes place. But the thing is that these are psychological weaknesses to some degree that have been exposed for centuries. And I'll refer to a couple books. One is The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon, which suggests that, like, in groups, people do things that they wouldn't normally do. And so creating circumstances where people associate themselves with groups gives them a kind of an irresponsible nature, because they don't think it's about themselves. They think it's about somebody else, or the group, or the nation, or their particular side, that kind of thing. And this is something that has been utilized to carry people into the circumstance that we have today, where most people are fearful of conflict. There's another one, which is the CIA during the late 50s and into the 70s created a operation they call Operation Chaos, which was to infiltrate anti-war and anti-government groups within the United States. Something the CIA shouldn't be doing, by the way, or shouldn't have been doing, but they did anyway. In which they infiltrated groups of people, and in kind of developing their infiltration manual, they simply just instilled conflict between people and kind of peppered conflict. And this is really kind of the thing that we either learn from or we fall victim to, and that is that if we wish for less problems, it's never going to happen. But if we wish for better skills, if we develop better skills when it comes to things like conflict, then the problems just solve themselves, because we understand how to deliver the value, how to derive the value in spite of the problems.
Something that stood out for me a while ago was the when you used the term the fear of conflict, and I can see that all around me, how people are afraid, and whether they're prepared well or not to resolve conflict or to enter it, but they're afraid to even try. They're afraid to enter conflict, and I feel, if I think about that a little more, it seems that there are certain groups and entities out there who tremendously benefit from the fact that people are unable or badly skilled and even afraid of entering conflict, because that gives them, in their paradigm, so to say, of a world of peace. But I say it, the kind of peace that they're trying to sell to people is really and truly war. So that's the kind of newspeak, right? Always newspeak, which is calling something the contrary of what it really is. So if you then give away your power and your possibility, your ability to resolve conflict and to find true harmony and true peace, on an individual basis, but also like on a level of your community, maybe of your nation and of humanity itself, then you're giving away that power, which is tremendous, to somebody else who will gladly pick it up and take it and say, hey, I'm the one who is keeping the peace. I'm the one who is making sure everything is all right. You need me. And for that, you have to do ABC in order for me to provide the service for you. So it's again, it's somebody taking that from you, but it's also you giving it away. So it's a give and take. And I feel being aware of that, and arming ourselves, I don't even want to say arming, equipping ourselves with the ability to resolve conflict and to enter conflict fearlessly, because we're knowing that there is something beyond the conflict which is better than the status that we had before, is really essential.
But what if it's all a pipe dream and we do everything right and nothing works out? Then what?
Do you have that feeling that nothing is working out?
No. I just want to explore the possibilities.
I don't think I did get a pipe dream. I don't think I get that.
A pipe dream means like we're never gonna win. This is all lost.
But if you won already?
Oh.
To me, this question seems to presuppose that people in the conflict are internally not in conflict. And in fact, I think the reality is that whenever two people are in conflict with each other, at least one of them has an internal conflict with himself that is unresolved.
Yeah, I would agree to that. And if you don't call it conflict, but lessons to learn, things to overcome, and progress to be made on our journey of self-realization, if I may call it like that, then yeah, it doesn't sound so like one against the other, but it sounds like, oh, it's actually, that's my journey, and everyone else who's appearing, whether he's, I don't know, trying to throw a stone at me or giving me a hug, but it's really a teacher. What is he, what is she teaching me, and there have been, in my life, there have been people who just appeared for a moment or for a very brief time, but who had such a deep and lasting impact that they really, they were, they created shifts in my life that brought me forward and that made me overcome, conflicts, internal conflicts that I didn't realize I had before.
Exactly.
So is it all about internal conflicts then?
I think so.
All of it? Every single bit?
Well, there may be parts that aren't, but I think that the vast majority of conflict between people stems from internal conflicts within them. If they resolve those, the external conflicts usually go
But I can't
away.
control other people, Bob. I can't tell them what to do and how to do it. I can't tie them to a flagpole until they change their mind.
I didn't say you should.
I want to.
Well,
Okay.
the quote that I referred to, and it's a Bruce Lee one as well, but to know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person. That is one of the things that kind of reveals the potential conflict we have within us, is through interaction with other people. And so to some degree there is the necessity of interacting with other people, of examining maybe a conflict on the outside between people as being the way that we discover the conflict that we have within us. But the beautiful thing is that is very powerful, because in a lot of ways, a lot of the anxieties, a lot of the fears, a lot of the doubts, a lot of the ignorance that we have, a lot of the things that are making things go wrong are a result of us not understanding ourselves and our own ability. So this is why it's such a great investment to really be happy to have people giving you feedback that may or may not be pleasant, but nevertheless is useful in discovering these things about ourselves that are incredibly important to us really becoming the person that we want to become.
And it is also that we are multifaceted beings, right? And that we are on varying stages of our own development. And so if we look at it from, keep on saying the holistic perspective, so we're physical beings, we're emotional beings, intellectual beings, and we're spiritual beings as well, then interacting with different people during our lifetime might mean that we will have to attune or train ourselves to respond to their specific current situation in a specific way. So we might be somebody who is, maybe very centered very much in the intellectual, in the mind realms, and we might be, very well versed in responding on that kind of mental level. So if we meet somebody who is also, able to interact and to resolve conflict, or who is accustomed to have conflict on that level, that might be something we are accustomed to and we're very well versed in. However, what if, if we meet somebody who is just accustomed and very well in resolving conflict on the physical level? Are we equipped for that? So I find it encouraging to first recognize that we are holistic beings, that we are on different stages of development, that everyone else as well is, and then to equip myself also holistically, so I then can be able to respond, in the physical realms, on the emotional level, and on the mental level, and to recognize or to kind of read and perceive where someone else is, and maybe to meet him or her at their best ability, but then at the same time also to challenge them to develop their other areas, and so we can together sharpen our skills and holistically develop our skills to meet conflict in every way.
So maybe this is a question for Bob, but when somebody else has a conflict with me and it doesn't go well, like we disagree or whatever, I often draw the conclusion that it's about me and I'm worthless or I'm useless and I'm unacceptable. And, if I only were better, they wouldn't be like that. You know what I mean? So how do we fix that?
Is that addressed to me?
Mm.
Well, self-deprecation under those circumstances is always, as far as I can tell, an indication of internal conflict. If I am beating myself up emotionally, I have a really significant internal conflict. And there is a whole bunch of technology for resolving internal conflict. This is what I've been doing for 45 years, is helping people resolve internal conflicts. And there isn't one method that fits every circumstance, but there are many methods. There are many methods that we can use. And I do think it behooves us, if we want to be really good at dealing with conflict, that we learn as much of that as we can in order to recognize when we're faced with a conflict, this is a familiar one. I know how to respond to this one, as opposed to, gee, I don't know what to do at all. There's a lot of learning can go into this stuff, and people decide individually how much they want to learn about getting around in life, managing in life, which includes resolving conflict. So I'm encouraged when someone is willing to give me feedback instead of getting reactive to it. I appreciate it, even if the feedback is completely misplaced. Even if I think it has no basis in reality, I appreciate their willingness to tell me what they're thinking and feeling in relation to me. I find it very useful.
Yeah, and I think that is a step in the right direction. When people have a kind of an attachment to respond to you, or to, even to call you a name or something like that, that's an indicator that they have some kind of emotional attachment to whatever it is that you're doing that they're being critical of. It may speak a lot more about their own critical nature of themselves, but nevertheless, it's still number one, an indicator that they have some reason to interact with you. and and even if they don't understand that, it's certainly a step in the right direction. And to me, this is kind of one of those things where, like, if you look at conflict as a gold mine and you take that kind of an attitude towards people, you're going to get a heck of a lot farther than if you look at conflict as something that we've got to eradicate from the planet somehow, because the powers that be say that's the way it's going to get done. We can all be in prison cells and be at peace in their mindset, or we can actually be humans and understand like how to rise above this.
Yeah, it is really how we respond to it that will determine if conflict will put us in the worst case maybe even to the grave, and we end up getting like a huge beating, or if it becomes something that will not only well win us the world, so to say, or open the world and open friends and open a whole new perspective, like a new life for us. If I think again of the example with capoeira, it's like, okay, if somebody, if I perceive somebody to start a conflict, and if I'm entering that, then I lost the perception of the game. So I somehow lost that, okay, this thing is actually a game, although it might be rough, but it's still a game. So if I'm completely involved in the conflict, then I'm losing perspective of all the potential that there really is. So then if I engage in that and if I respond to it, and then there might be violence, and there might be injury, and it's not going to be nice at all, not for me, not for the other one, and not for everybody around who's standing there watching and actually trying to create something positive ideally. Whereas if if I shift my perspective, and even if the other one comes at me with violence, with conflict, yet I have through training and experience and wisdom developed the skills and the abilities to even when under heavy and under skilled attack, not having to respond even with the same energy, but actually being able to, there's blows, there's kicks coming in, and instead of reacting with something against it, I can actually, I don't know, jump on the floor and spin on my head. And that's like, wow. So that's the art. So it's really the art of responding to conflict, not throwing a stone back, but actually taking the stone that is there, doing something, I don't know, build a house with it or whatever, just to, like, searching for an example. It's like, wow. So everybody else perceives, oh, this guy is really trying to hit that one and to hurt him, and what is the other guy doing? He's like, all right, he's going on his head and he's doing a back flick and spinning around and doing something that's totally amazing and actually looks really beautiful, and it's actually in tune to the music and to the rhythm. And it's like, wow, and in that can be a teaching, not only for the one who is trying to attack and to hurt you, but it can be a teaching for everyone. So there's the potential of actually gaining a new friend by showing that there's a different response to even harsh situations than the conditioned perceived enemy and destructive conflict. And you could win the crowd itself too, because everybody's saying, oh wow, even this guy obviously tried to hurt the other one, but he didn't respond to it. Like he was totally in harmony. He did something amazing that I want to go talk to him and ask him how he did that, and I want to go play with him next. And then the next, and then that moment here that could shift the energy of the entire community, of the entire moment, not only of within myself, but also within the one that was confronting me, and within everyone else who was even just walking by, passing by, or having a look at it. So I feel that that's a tremendous power that we have there to shift not only our own reality, but the collective reality that we're living in together.
Well, I think there's also the understanding that, like, experiencing your emotions is something that you should consider as useful. So experiencing anger, experiencing sorrow, experiencing all these emotions that we are capable of, and being able to describe them accurately is certainly an experience we should be grateful for. And in so many cases, it's kind of these taboo subjects, like being angry and not being able to go through the experience of anger into a productive or healthy way, is something that we don't practice, but it's certainly something that we could practice, and that's, I think, probably one of the things that I certainly identify with Dennis with is like having a practice, like being able to practice something to the point that it becomes art. Certainly conflict resolution is one of those things that we can adapt as part of who we are as a character, and part of who we are, that can be another skill set that gives us a level of value that really takes us far beyond what we think is possible.
I agree. And it's a skill set that can be acquired, that can be trained, and that can be practiced. So to me, it boils down to the question: is like, can we respond to something that is violent, that is ugly, that is in disharmony? Can we respond with beauty? Can we respond with peace? And can we respond with harmony to that? And I feel that is really what can turn things around. And if we're aware that the peace, the harmony, the beauty, the love is there also, and if we don't see it, if we don't perceive it, it's not because it's not there, it's because we haven't been able to focus on it and to find it. And it's so easy to and I see it as well, of course. Mike, you mentioned the situation earlier. There's a lot of people wearing funny things and thinking they have to do certain things, and there's groups and people pushing a really weird and gruesome agenda for a long time, seemingly. But at the same time, can we respond to it? Not that we don't see and perceive it, but we see the violence in it, and we see that it's not good as we perceive it. But can we respond to it with something positive? Can we respond with peace and with beauty, and showing people that life is still beautiful? There's love. There is there's ways of getting together, because it is so easy to be sucked into, oh yeah, it's true, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and then the next one comes, yeah, that's true, and then we have entire communities, and then we are sucked into that kind of energy, which is ultimately what they're proposing and what they are laying out right there. So we're being sucked into it, confirming and reaffirming the the ugly and violent ways that they're actually initiating. And I'm not saying to not look at it and not to react, but I'm trying to encourage us to still, even within the worst of the worst, to find, and even if it's just the sunset, the sun is going to come out. Oftentimes in my experience, like it, I felt totally devastated. I felt like, okay, nothing is working, and I'm not even sure, how to get by over the next month. And like, but I say, okay, but still the sun is going to shine next day. And still, oh, that was a beautiful smile, right there. Or, wow, this little one just gave me a hug, and that was so heartwarming. So I was able to find, small things, and those small things became really big once I focused on them and once I found them. And it's like, when you focus in it, you will see it too, and you can see the light even in the darkest place if you try to look for it.
I'm kind of fascinated, Dennis, by your use of martial arts metaphors, because one of the things I really enjoy teaching is a small skill set that I call verbal kung fu. And it basically is a way of listening. When you listen to verbal abuse or insults, and you know how to listen properly, you're unaffected by them. You don't internalize them. You don't take them on and say, oh, I guess I'm really stupid or dumb or bad or what have you. And it's basically a matter of knowing what to listen for and recognizing through that the intention of the person who is attempting to abuse or insult you. And this is something that I can teach someone the basics in an hour, and in a couple of hours they can practice it enough to get good at it. So I see that your metaphor of the martial arts is very apt, just conversationally, before you ever get to a place of real violence, just thinking verbally the way a martial artist responds through their training.
Nice. And it points at something that you laid out before, which is the inner conflict, which is which is where it starts, right? If somebody would initiate an even a verbal attack, and if it's somebody I've never known, and if I don't inside myself have doubts about myself, or have feelings of guilt, or have feelings that I'm stupid, then anybody could come and call me stupid, but it wouldn't really affect me in that way because I'm not believing it. So it's only if there is a
Exactly.
weakness in myself, and then I can turn around and say, oh, that's a great teacher, because he just taught me that there's something unresolved within myself, there's conflict within myself. So it's nothing personal, it's not to get engaged personally, or to take it personally, but it's like, oh, that's interesting. I
Okay, and
just
then
feel it.
what? How do you fix it? How do you resolve it? How?
Well, a lot of fixing occurred already in the moment where you can realize where it hits you, because if you realize that, it's like, oh, that hit me, but it hit a part of me, it hit a part of my character, of my ego, so to say. And it's like, oh, where does that come from? And you follow through. But if you have the ability to recognize and to witness that, then it's just one more step to see, like, who is witnessing that. All right, so if there's someone inside me who can witness that, that hurtfulness, then there's also somebody who has not been heard. So do I want to focus on the one, the lower self, or the perceived, the ego that has been hurt, and do I want to respond from that, or do I want to focus on the witness, on that one which supersedes and which is able to perceive that without actually ever getting hurt? And then it's a choice again, and there's freedom in that, because you can choose from where you act or don't act.
So you have to let go of all the resentment and bitterness and the wanting to like punish people for being mean.
Do you, or can you just be and accept that too, and accept that there is bitterness, and that there's wanting to retaliate, and there's all of that? You can accept that, and
In the nose.
in the nose. Yeah, I was gonna mention that earlier. Okay. Well, I thought you were talking about face reading and how things manifest, because that's just another result, right? Which you are expert in. That if we have repeated experiences, and if you're not able to resolve, conflict in that way, then that conflict also will express itself through our physical being, our expressions.
Yeah, but when there's conflict written on the face, well, I was just joking about punching in the nose. I sometimes exaggerate to get better discussion, but I've never punched anybody before in my entire life. Don't planning in it. But yeah, so when there's conflict unresolved in the face, it often comes up with like stuckness. So there's either somebody stuck like this, or stuck like this, or stuck like this, like depending what energy, like, sometimes older people, they walk around, they have this face. That's from making that face so many times. It's stuck that way. Grandma was right. Willow, why are you so quiet today? You're looking beautiful.
I'm just very tired. And I'm enjoying learning everything from everybody instead of talking.
There was a couple things I wanted to touch base on, because Dennis mentioned ego, and that's kind of one of those 12 senses that I don't think most people are familiar with, a sense of ego, and how that translates into some of the things that, in regard to collaborative environment and community, having those, or considering those additional senses that we talked about some weeks ago, it probably will also kind of give us a greater understanding of how this actually benefits us in a really positive way. The other thing I wanted to mention was the idea that violence is a desperate act, that it's essentially a non-thinking act. It's like it's the defense mechanism. It's like the last line of defense is violence. And to look out in the world and see violence all over the place, to look out in the world and see conflict all over the place, certainly through the glasses that the media has given us, but to see that is really to realize that like how mindless we have become in regard to understanding each other. Because when violence is taking place, it's a lack of understanding. It's desperation that's taking place, because people just aren't using their mind. They're not thinking. They're not understanding what's going on. They're not comprehending what's going on. And because they're not doing that, they're in a desperate situation in which they feel like they've got to strike instead of do something else, that they are so fearful of the other side that that's the only thing they've got. And to me, that is the indicator of like how much potential we're giving away by just existing in a on a planet or whatever you want to call this, but within a humanity that is essentially okay with wars and blowing other people up because they're on that side of the planet or they're over our resources.
That's it from a former military person. So, you know, you saw it from the inside.
Yeah, and I was going to comment about that as well, because one of the things that they do in the military is really take it to a point that you're constantly on the edge of violence, and that even translates into violence amongst each other. You know, in a military unit where you're just constantly battling with each other, constantly conflicting with each other, and if anybody steps out of the kind of the status quo, they've got a problem with everybody else. And the only resolution in many cases is just violence or, you know, force.
We do have a few comments. Shambhavi's there. She's sending hearts. And Don Clark has been posting a few minutes back already. The other person has free will. Yes, you could always be better. And who knows how much that might really help. However, all of us sometimes choose not to change. Otherwise, change would not be heroic. And then he adds, life without conflict would be a book that's just blank pages. Since two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time, conflict is baked into the pie, locally, or where's the meaning?
Yeah, that's a great that's a great point. I mean, you know, the idea of the hero's journey is one in which conflict is a piece of the storyline.
Yeah, it does seem to have a continuous presence in our lives in different ways, forms and shapes. And I guess accepting that or coming to that conclusion from in an early stage will then be a good ground or fertile ground for actually dealing with it, because recognizing that conflict is something that's there, you know, it obviously is on the outside. I can perceive it all the way over, and then I can say, okay, you know, let me assume that the outside is a reflection of what's on the inside. So where do I want to engage on the outside, and when and where do I want to engage on the inside? Because really accepting that it is just a manifestation of my inner being, what I'm manifesting, what I'm seeing manifested on the outside, then I could just stay at home and work on things, you know, just being there, which is a possibility as well. But then also, you know, and that's just my view still.
You know,
I was brought in this world as a physical being as well, so might as well engage on that level as well. But it's a choice, right?
Yeah. So this contrast, it can come, well, I guess contrast may lead to conflict or may lead to peace. Maybe that's what it is. So contrast could be like, oh, we're out of milk. I just poured myself something and I want milk in it and we're out of milk. Or conflict, and that could cause a conflict. You could lose your temper, throw the empty container across the room, break a window. You know, there's all sorts of things that could happen from being out of milk, such a simple little thing, right? Or there could be, you know, a pigeon shot on your car or something, you know, these small things that are insignificant, but for somebody in the right frame of mind, that could be a huge conflict, a huge point of contention.
That's a good example of the fact that the more we are in conflict internally and more stressed internally, the more little things get to us. By the way, Willow, you've been really quiet during this discussion. I'm very curious what you've been thinking.
To be honest, I've been very tired all day, and my thoughts are very scattered. So I'm just mostly taking in what everyone else is thinking. I've been contemplating my own issues with like internal conflict and how I avoid conflict on a day-to-day basis because it makes me very uncomfortable. And recently, going through an illness and not quite recovering all the way. Uh, that's been a huge point of contention in my life where it's like I don't really want to address how I'm feeling, but I can't seem to get away from it. So uh, addressing conflict is actually something I probably need to hear more about than participate in the discussion.
Thank you.
Maybe that's why you're tuning out, because you're like, oh, I don't know, this is too much on the ball. I'll just look over here.
Some days everything's a little bit too much. So,
Well, isn't that I mean, what we understand is that like we're all kind of being conditioned all the time, and it's really it's a conscious choice to condition ourselves to have the skills that are necessary to to get where we want to go, or we just allow other people to condition us to do whatever they want us to do, and we just allow that to happen. But if we're going to make this a practice or make this something about our life that we can get better at, what would you guys recommend as far as things that we could do on a daily basis or maybe a weekly basis, a practice that would get us better at conflict resolution and understanding that conflict is actually opportunity?
Ho'oponopono. That's one option.
And how would you practically go about that?
Wait, what was the first thing? I always get them mixed up in the wrong order. I'm going to look it up just for you guys.
I'm sorry.
Please forgive me.
I'm sorry.
Please forgive me.
Please forgive me.
Thank you. I love
Thank you.
Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. So anytime we're stressed or agitated or whatever at ourselves or at somebody else, saying those 4 phrases, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, that could help.
Any other suggestions?
I have one little one, and that is to recognize that when someone else's character traits are particularly annoying to me or problematic for me, it's because they are demonstrating behaviors that I dislike in myself. We project who we are onto other people, and then we react to those projections. It's a really simple thing, but it makes a huge difference when you recognize it as it's happening.
I would put out. Sorry.
I was just going to say, and I think that verbal kung fu is very valuable for that as a practice. It's just a matter of changing how you listen. With practice, listening properly takes a lot of conflict out of your life really quickly.
Nice. Dennis?
I'd remind myself, I'd seek to remind myself and ask myself, is it a game? Are you still playing? Because if it's a game and you're not playing, then you miss the point of the game. And if it's a game and, the game is being played in a way that, that kind of is like, I'm getting, let's say, too emotional and I'm getting too involved and I forget over the hustle and bustle and over everything, over the stress, I forget that it's actually a game, then I lost the game in a way. And remembering that it is a game and that I'm playing the game, it also means that I have the power to stop playing. So I'm the one who engaged in the game. So I take self-responsibility for the fact that I sat down on the table and I started to play. So at any time I can withdraw and I say, okay, I'm done. I had my fun, and then I step out of the game. So that's so that's taking self-responsibility, and that's reminding myself that it's a game that I choose to be engaged with. And since I made the choice, obviously, because I'm here playing, to play the game, I might as well do everything within my reach to play the game in a way that is enjoyable for myself, and ideally even for the other one.
I would say that children are probably the easiest to learn from. So maybe creating the circumstance where you can observe children and how they interact when it comes to conflict, and then how that might be resolved through a discussion or an examination of what is actually the facts versus what is perceived, can be a interesting way, I think, to teach adults how to behave in a much more productive manner. And certainly, I think, and I don't know, Bob, maybe you can comment on this as well. It's almost like it's inherent. It's almost like it's in our nature to be collaborative and to be cooperative towards each other. And it's just through the conditioning that we receive through all these institutions and media and everything else that we lose that ability. And if you look at children, they don't seem to have the kind of hardships. I mean, there's definitely conflicts that arise in the playground and so forth. But yet, for some reason, the kids, when it comes to the playground, they're all ready to go on out and play in the playground.
When we're being creative, it always feels like we're playing, even when it's hard work. If you're doing something that's really hard work, but it's being creative, it feels like play. I think it's a good thing to remember that. Another way of putting it very succinctly is, if I'm not having fun, I'm doing something wrong. I'm visiting with you guys, I'm having fun. Must be doing something right.
Nice. That's true. That resonates with me a lot. And I remember that one scene a few years back ago in the, I was on a visit home here with my mommy, and I missed the last bus and I had to go home, and it was like snowing and wet and windy, and I was like, okay, yeah, like I have a chance. I haven't been running for a while, so let me see how long it takes me to reach home. And then I ran and I sprinted home, and it was like a 20 or 25-minute run. And I came home, I was sweaty and I was like feeling great, but I was all wet and soaked. And Mom was like, oh my God, you could have just called and I would have picked you up, by car. And like, why did you do these things? And you keep on doing these terrible things. I was like, I was doing something for me. Like, I love that, that was great for me. So it's just, you see how the same situation for somebody could mean the worst thing in the world, and for somebody else that could have been the fulfillment of a dream in that moment.
Yeah.
I've had experiences like that.
Well, I think that's a excellent way to step out, because we're out of time, folks. And
the sun has set.
The sun has set. And we really appreciate the time and attention that you've given us to listen and understand this very important topic. I hope you learned something from this. And we are here on Mondays and Wednesdays, 5:35 p.m. Eastern time, whatever that is in Pacific time. And we certainly invite you to come back. What do we have any idea of what we're going to be doing next week? I thought we had maybe a guest lined up, or no?
I think it was. Oh, I don't have it pulled up right now. Let me see. Fine, I can do it. Topic. Getting it. Loading it.
Do it.
No, well, let's see.
No.
I think it's Lucy McMonagle as a guest.
Well, we will be back. We will have something interesting to discuss. I'm not exactly sure if we'll have a guest, but as you've taken
Negativity Be Gone. It's Lucy on Monday with Negativity Be Gone. So this is following exactly for after this week, where we had division, and then now we have conflict, and then how to get rid of the residual negativity from our bodies and from our minds. She's a little esoteric, a little bit out there, but I really, really like her. I think she's great. She's like a money expert and very logical, but at the same time, a little woo-woo, which is a good blend.
Nice.
I hope
Yeah,
you guys
that's-
will invite me back. I'm enjoying this. I'd love to come back again.
We'll consider it, Bob. We'll consider it.
You've been an
You'll be
excellent
back.
guest.
You'll
Yes.
be
You've been
back.
an excellent guest, Bob. So
I was
thank you
thinking
very
we should
much.
do verbal kung fu maybe over Christmas or something, because that would be useful.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
But I have to check with my team because, you know, they might be against it.
I'd love to have you back too, and thank you so much, Bob, for coming on. That was really, it was a pleasure
But that was
to have you
key.
on.
Well, thank you, Dennis.
And is there
Willow.
yeah, man, is there like a website or anything you'd like to share about your work, or where people can, you know?
Well, I
connect
have a
with you?
couple. The one with the most information is called titanians.org. Titanians, TITANIANS.org. It has a lot of articles on it, most of which I wrote. And there's a lot of material there, tremendous amount of material. And for those, I promised Agnieszka my book, Soul Bonding, and I'm going to give her the Flourish book as well. So there'll be that available to you. And by all means, feel free to connect with me individually. I'm always pleased to do that.
Was there another website that you were also developing, Bob?
Yes, I'm developing one called civilizationdoneright.com. And it basically, we just started it, but it's going to grow pretty rapidly, I hope, into quite a powerhouse of information on what should we have done 8,000 years ago when we decided to have government. We as a species, you know, invented government 8,000 years ago. And if we hadn't done that, we might have had a real civilization, because what we've got now is not a real civilization by any reasonable definition of the term.
We're so civilized, Bob. We're so civilized.
Some of
Only
us
if
are.
that means that we are sheep.
Well, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is that we're just about to reach our 1-year anniversary of Raising Excellence, and I definitely want to put that out there as well. We're gonna have some special announcements when it comes to the birthday show. Is that coming up?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to have to discuss more details about that.
Okay, that's something that's also coming up. So stay tuned for that.
And we just had one more comment from Mark. How little my there's just another one. Thank you for hosting a conversation of controversy. I sometimes wonder how much nonverbal language I forget to consider when I'm trying to communicate with another man or woman. How little my words can have in expression, and how quick those same words can cut deep scars. Sometimes just a hug is all you need. Yes.
I agree. Hugs
Very
are
much.
always awesome.
Thanks for that comment, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for listening, everybody. Mwah.
Yes.
I guess
Thank
we
you
can
so
play
much.
the outro, hey?
Yes.
We can do that.
Thank you so much, everybody. And until we see and talk again. Bye-bye.
Monday,
Adios.
negativity, be gone.